But then I learned there was an actual text manuscript surviving in William Shakespeare's own hand. Not a play he'd written, a play he had helped rewrite. This is the famous Sir Thomas More script, and Hand D, or the fourth hand, is believed to be William Shakespeare. And if so, this is the only text manuscript surviving in William Shakespeare's own hand. And this is where there's a very interesting Canadian connection. This theory that Hand D was written by Shakespeare goes back to the 19th century. Well, in the year 1960, the Stratford Festival, right here in Ontario, Canada, was doing a series of lectures, and they decided to confirm once and for all that this was written by Shakespeare. And they had a very interesting way of doing it. They went to RCMP headquarters in Ottawa, and they asked, "Do you have a handwriting expert?" And they answered, "Do we have a handwriting expert? We have the handwriting expert, Commissioner Roy A. Huber. He wrote the book on it. It's called Handwriting Identification, Facts and Fundamentals." It's still available on Amazon to this day. So they go to this Roy A. Huber and they say, "Look, we have 6 signatures. Can you study this and confirm once and for all that the signatures are written by the same person that wrote this Hand D?" Simple project. Actually, Roy A. Huber didn't know what he was getting into because the writing back then is considerably different, obviously. But he spent 3 months on it. He became an actual expert at reading this type of writing and prepared a whole lecture, did the complete analysis, as only the RCMP can. Goes to Stratford to give his lecture. They're all sitting there, much like today. He starts his lecture, quote, "A positive identification of Shakespeare as Hand D is not possible." Shock goes through the room. What do you mean? They wanted to confirm the thing, not open a can of worms. But he's got a whole lecture. He's got charts, and he shows them. All of the I's are dotted in the signatures. None of the I's are dotted in this Hand D. And specific letters are completely different. The K in Shakespeare's a completely different K in all the writing in the Hand D. And you can do this yourself, actually. Go on Google and download the Hand D and download the signatures, and you can match them up and see exactly what Roy Huber did. And that was the end of Hand D. Only it wasn't. A very strange thing happened. Nothing. Nothing. The RCMP's findings were completely ignored. Well, this is Shroud of Turin stuff. Remember the story of the Shroud of Turin? Fascinating story. The Shroud of Turin, as you know, is the actual burial shroud of Jesus Christ. And when Jesus Christ was taken off the cross, he was put in this shroud. And when God resurrected Jesus, it burned an image of Jesus' face right on the shroud. You've all seen this on the internet or on TV. The only problem is that in the 20th century, something called carbon dating was discovered. And in a one-time only deal, the Vatican allowed scientists to cut off a piece of the shroud, divide it in 3, and send it to 3 different labs for carbon dating. All 3 labs came back with the same finding, that the shroud wasn't from Jesus' time at all. The shroud was fabricated in the 14th century, which is not surprising because the first time the Shroud of Turin is even mentioned in history is the 14th century. Well, that was the end of the shroud. Only it wasn't. It was completely ignored by everyone that didn't want to hear the information. And to this day, people line up for hours to see the shroud, even though it's been confirmed by science. It has no connection to Jesus whatsoever. Well, this is the exact same thing that had happened with this Hand D. That's when I realized why none of these authorship questions were ever taught to me in all the schools and colleges I attended, because Shakespeare's not factual. Shakespeare's not historical. Shakespeare has, in fact, become a religion. And it can't be questioned. Don't take my word for it. Let me quote one of the foremost Shakespearean experts on the planet, Professor James Shapiro of Columbia University, a strict believer in the traditional story of William Shakespeare. Listen to what he says. Quote, "I personally believe that William Shakespeare wrote the plays and poems attributed to him. However, the Shakespeare authorship question remains taboo in academic circles and walled off from serious study." Unquote. Taboo and walled off from study. I wasn't aware there are 400-year-old literary questions that are taboo and walled off from study.